at 6 p.m. sharp, and ask for those in attendance to stand and face the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. Welcome to the Independence Township Planning Commission meeting. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room to my left. Agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the township website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended this evening by the Planning Commission. State law establishes planning commissions. This planning commission is comprised of 7 residents appointed to serve their community. Members are appointed by the supervisor and confirmed by the township board. Other individuals participating in the meeting this evening include representatives of the township's planning consultant, the township's engineering consultant, and as well as the township planner. If you wish to address the planning commission, please come forward to the podium when recognized. Provide your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the planning commission, not to anyone else in the room. If anyone has a cell phone or any other device that may disrupt the meeting, please either switch it to silent mode or turn it off. And at this time, I ask the Planning Commission Secretary to conduct a roll call.
Mr. Galley.
Here.
Mr. Lochran.
Here.
Mr. Mazza.
Here.
Mr. Patel is absent. Mr. Ritchie.
Here.
Chairman Savada.
Here.
Ms. Tully here.
We're absent 1 member. We have a quorum. We can conduct business this evening. Next item on the agenda is a review of the agenda. Does anyone have any revisions to propose for the agenda? And if not, does anyone want to move a motion to approve this agenda as printed?
Dick was talking about taking something off, or we're leaving everything on there?
Mr. Rotman, was there any suggestion by staff to remove anything, or are we going to proceed as?
No, proceed
as is. Okay.
I'll move to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll support.
Motion and support. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We move forward with this agenda. Next item on the agenda is item E, for public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in attendance who wishes to speak to an item that is not on tonight's agenda? Seeing no one, we close item E. We move on to item F, which is for public hearings. 3 public hearings scheduled this evening. I'll introduce item F1, which is PC file number 2023-001. Petitioner is David Goldberg. The property is located on the west side of Sashabaw Road, north of I-75. Parcel number 0822326007, presently zoned OS2, Office Service 2. And the applicant is requesting plan rezoning overlay approval from OS2 Office Service 2 to PRO-MS Motor Vehicle Service Station in order to expand the convenience store and add a drive-through tenant. Mr. Carlisle, would you like to present this, please?
Yes, Commissioners are aware that this is an addition to an existing station. The station itself is zoned MS. It was actually done so by consent judgment in conjunction with properties surrounding it to the west and to the north. The predominant restrictions in the consent judgment were control of access to Sashabaw Road, requiring cross-access between the station and the other parties that were properties that were party to the consent. And then restriction on use, I think, with the gas station with restriction on repair. All those requirements have long since been met, by all parties. So, but the consent judgment is still in place. Now, the property in question is not party to the consent judgment. It wasn't even, I don't believe it was owned by the original owners of the station at that point in time when the consent judgment was put in place. So the piece of property that we're talking about, the front half of it is zoned Office Service 2, and I wish I could give you some explanation for that, but I can't. And the back half is zoned C2, I think. The back half of it is zoned commercial. It's consistent with the surrounding property to the north. So what the applicant is asking is the ability to expand the station and be able to, expand into this piece of property that they do own to the south, have that zoned, MS to be consistent with the current zoning of the gas station property, and to make some improvements to the site from that standpoint. There'd be an addition to the north end of the building and an addition to the south end of the building. We're generally very supportive of this. I think that the applicant has made improvements to the station as time has gone on, the current owner. It seems to be a logical thing that they want to do. It's right at the interchange, so consequently, being able to provide more services seemed to be, pretty common with most service stations and gas stations, convenience stations. We can't even really call them service stations anymore. Anyway, my questions were that several specific aspects of the site plan depend on the specific nature of these uses. And I felt, my only concern is that what is being requested is somewhat vague in terms of the floor planning of those issues, because we know that uses, I believe that what they are going to do, and probably going to tell you, is that the northern addition is going to be converted into C-store. The southern addition is going to be converted into 2 spaces, one of which will be the space that has the drive-through. The nature of those uses is going to impact traffic and parking, and the functioning of the drive-through, for that matter. I think if you all remember the whole Big Beast discussion, we had some very detailed drive-through data supplied by Big V's that really demonstrated that 90% of their business came through the drive-through during the peak AM hour. So that being that kind of circumstance, it probably wouldn't be much of an issue. But a high volume or higher volume food type restaurant, even with some seating in either space, is going to impact parking, which I do think they have enough room to accommodate that, but also traffic and traffic circulation through the site. I think that the site is fairly well set up for this, because unlike some other projects that we've seen, the drive-through, this is what we're always kind of concerned about, is conflicts between the drive-through traffic and the balance of the traffic, using the service station, the gas pumps. This is pretty well set up for that, because you have that whole sort of almost, dedicated lane on the Sashabaw Road frontage portion of the site that will take people right out to the exit onto Sashabaw Road. I think the other concern is that with traffic and with the nature of the uses, I anticipated that some commissioners are going to, and I've mentioned this to the applicants and their consultants, that the concern really is left-hand turns out of here onto Sashabaw Road. And again, that kind of speaks to the nature of the use. If it's a coffee shop with a drive-through, I think we know it's going to be drive time traffic. It's going to be predominantly people going south and getting right back on the expressway. Probably not going to be a problem. But if it's something that is a more intense use of the space as a restaurant use, where we have evening traffic, but we know that there's a problem at that point in time, because people are coming home. We know if Pine Knob is in session, making a left-hand turn on Sashabaw Road from this site is going to be difficult. So those are the natures of I'm generally I'm supportive of the request, but I have some concerns about these things, because I feel that we need additional information before the Planning Commission should move forward on this. So be happy to answer any questions.
So I see potentially there's three potential users of restaurant drive-throughs that generate a lot of traffic. One is a coffee user in the mornings, generate a lot. One user is located already basically across the street, Culver's, very busy. And the other makes chicken sandwiches. The characteristics are different. If the chicken sandwich place goes here, that's a heck of a lot different than if the coffee place goes there.
Yeah. Or any other kind of.
Or any, yeah, but those are the,
Yeah.
I don't want to use worst case, because I'm not disparaging the company, I'm really talking about the traffic volumes that they generate. And to me, this seems, they have the opportunity here, they're voluntarily offering conditions, and they seem to be asking for somewhat of a blank check, and I think it's somewhat unreasonable on their part to not zero in on what this could be, because we're at a position where we really don't know exactly what they want here. And I agree with you. I have no issue with that, with conceptually with adding on to this use. They were before us not too long ago with signage that we approved. We want them to succeed, but I think I agree with the report. I think we're lacking some information in terms of use and in terms of traffic and parking that I think it's premature to make a decision this evening, but I'm only one person.
Okay.
Any questions for Mr. Carlisle?
I just, to expand on what you were saying, I guess, are we just talking about rezoning, or are we talking about the layout? Because like I say, or the use, because really, if we rezone it, or approve rezoning, he still has to bring a site plan back, for approval. Is that not correct, or?
Well, this is a conditional rezoning, and it's conditioned upon the plan that you see here. And I think you should allow, the applicant to respond to this, And I guess my concern would be that if we do rezone it, and then we're essentially acknowledging they're entitled to any use of that drive-through as that
part of that
fit into that space. That's what my concern is. So I think, again, it's my feeling that we need to have more information regarding what's planned here. Again, and I don't have a problem with the drive-through. It's just the nature of what the drive-through is serving. So.
No, I agree. Any other questions? Go ahead.
I couldn't figure out from the schematic exactly where, I think I read there was one dual entrance exit onto Sashabaw.
There's a boulevard entrance onto Sashabaw, and then there's also a cross-access with the Tim Hortons next door.
Oh,
Right on the north side of the
Yeah.
property line.
That was actually prescribed, here, let me show you. That was part of the consent judgment, but that had to happen, or it did. And that's right there. Thank you very much.
That consent judgment has to have a pretty long date when it happened. I mean, the gas station's been there as long as I can remember.
So long that we had trouble finding it.
Actually, they tore it down and rebuilt it.
Yeah, because when you
So
talk
long
about
ago
the
that
cross connection, the
there was-
cross connection just occurred.
Yeah, we had difficulty, locating it. But yeah, that was a bunch of years ago.
Okay.
so where is the exit onto Sashabaw then?
Need a pointer.
It's right here.
There's like a little
It's
boulevard
existing.
island right there in the middle.
Here's Sashabaw Road, and there's.
Yeah,
That's
no.
it, right
Yep.
there? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for me?
Yeah, just a couple questions. So I'm familiar with a lot of PROs that have multiple steps. Are there multiple steps to this, like a concept review and then a final plan? And
Yeah.
how does that work here?
Well, essentially, this is the rezoning based on this PRO plan. Then they'd have to come back with a because this doesn't even meet a conceptual plan at this
Yeah.
stage. So they'd have to come back with a conceptual and a final site plan, yes.
Okay,
And
so we
and the
wouldn't,
rezoning would have to be approved by the township board also,
so what's the request in front of us tonight then?
to rezone this property from office service to MS based on the concept plan that you see.
Not a PRO?
PRO,
Oh,
that's
PRO
correct.
overlay,
Yes,
okay.
yes. And once it gets through, there'll be an actual PRO agreement when it goes to the township board.
So we'll still see a site plan?
You'll
for-
see,
oh.
you'll see a site plan.
So, just a couple questions then. It looks like they added a couple parcels to the south, and then do they also own the parcel to the west?
No. The parcel, the parcel that they own to the south is a long, very long, somewhat narrow piece of property. It goes much further back than what you see on this plan. At this point, they're not, from what I understand, they have no plans to use the back part of this property. That's all, that's the only additional property that they
Okay,
own.
yeah, I'd like to hear from the applicant on that, because it seems like they're, I guess, locking in that area there, and maybe there's no use for it. I don't know what the topography is. I know it's right off the freeway, so.
Yeah, it could potentially be used in conjunction with the property next door,
Okay.
but for this piece, pretty tough. It falls off quite
Yeah.
substantially.
We're not gonna take any action until the applicant's given a chance to speak. I just wanna.
Well, you have to have a public hearing, you have to open a
Exactly.
public hearing too.
So there'll be an opportunity to speak, yep.
To piggyback on the first part of Tim's comments, he was talking about procedure, so if we're seeing another site plan and then a final site plan, let's say it is that scenario where it's a heavier use, you're saying we don't have the ability, hey, make that a right turn only because of traffic?
I think you need to find this my opinion is, we need to know this information now.
But I guess my question is if we did approve the rezoning, that doesn't limit our ability to change the site plan based on the tenant and the use that they apply for in the next submission.
I think what he is saying
Well, that's my
why I am
question.
saying that. I mean, and again, I mean, they may not have a specific tenant.
That's
But I
what
think
I'm
we
getting
can,
at.
I think we can't prescribe conditions for them. They've offered this as a conditional approval. But what they could recognize through this discussion, that if we can get set more parameters on what the exact nature of the tenant space that's going to be used there, you could move forward, but I mean, we don't have that information at this point in time. So that's, again, I mean, I'm only providing you with the information that we have at this point, and maybe they have more to present tonight.
So the petitioner has the ability, under the provisions of our zoning ordinance, to fine tune this more and give us more information. And potentially,
Before you,
before we take action.
Correct.
Potentially, give us more information in terms of what's proposed here, what potential tenants could be there, what type of users, et cetera. And they're not doing that at this time.
I don't know. But I mean, unless it's memorialized in the PRO agreement, it's just all speculative.
Let's just move on, get the rest of the information. and decide
Yeah.
what we're gonna do.
Mr. Longhurst, anything to add to the presentation?
Not at this stage.
Okay.
Our review pointed out all of the things that they can look forward to in the
Yeah.
next stage, right?
Yep. I'd like to give the petitioner a chance to add anything that we missed or clarify anything that needs clarification. Now's your chance to come to the podium, introduce yourself, and state your case.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is David Goldberg. My law firm represents the owner of the property, 6889 Sashabaw Road LLC. Thank you for allowing this time today at your meeting to present our proposed project. Who I have here with me today, and the owner of the property is also the operator of the property, so they're hand in hand. I have with me Mr. Isaac Hanna, who's the owner of the property, his son Julian and Dominic Hanna, who are the day-to-day operators of the business, and then Chad Holdwick with Green Tech Engineering, who's the project's engineers. I also have available on Zoom, as you can see there, the ML is Mike Labadie and the JB is Jill Bauer. They're with Fishbeck Engineering, and they're the project's traffic consultants. So, first of all, before I even get into my presentation, I want to address some of the things that seem to be of a significant concern on your faces. We're following the process right now, and I'm certainly not trying to force anything through in any specific speed. We understand it's a process. We understand that the first step in the process was to have a public hearing, which is what we're having today, so that we can hear from any members of the public or any of our surrounding property owners that wanted to chime in on what we're proposing. If the commission's not prepared to take action even on its recommendation today, that's certainly not anything that we're forcing on you. The proposed project, as you can see, is to, one, to the north, expand the existing convenience store, not adding any additional pumps to the business. The pumps would remain the same. There already were 5 parking spaces to the north of the building. Those will just get pushed north. Those 5 spaces would at some time in the future, or the near future, but in the future be allocated for EV charging stations. Based on the fact that the applicant owns the adjacent property, which again, we're proposing to use a portion of up front, which happens to be the part that's zoned OS2, which is a rather weird use for that particular landlocked parcel and its configuration. And then the rear part is C2 and aligns with the C2 property to our north. As was mentioned, the property was subject to a consent judgment that preceded our ownership. The consent judgment was, at a time, if you read through the consent judgment, other than to allow for mutual access, shared utilities, storm drainage, ingress and egress with the surrounding properties, was designed to specifically limit what at the time was a gas station operation from its, if we all remember from the 80s and 70s, service stations where you would, have tow trucks and bring your car and have repair work done. Those days are pretty much so long gone. This is the current use of service stations. So the prohibitions in the consent judgment aren't anything that the applicant would ever want to do, and is offering as part of the conditions to put those same restrictions and shared cooperations on this property. As far as the uses, yes, we would incorporate the northern part into the convenience store to just add more floor space. The southern part, when we do not have a specific user. It is 4,800 square feet, and if no portion of it was somehow incorporated into this convenience store going south, which is always something that the Hannahs could consider as well, the balance would be commercial uses, having a drive-through at the end. It is wrought for either what they call these days a fast casual food user, or primarily what we would envision is some type of a beverage user, whether it's a coffee user or even like a smoothie type of a user. But I would envision with it being, Morningside at the highway access, that would be a user that would be interested in the site. We do not envision it as being used in any way as like a sit-down type of a restaurant. It would be 2 users, probably, with 4,800, so roughly, or was it 4,200? So about 2,100 square feet, maybe 2,000 and 2,400 for each user. We acknowledge that in order to satisfy those types of uses, parking will be a significant issue, as Mr. Carlisle mentioned. Based on the parking that we're showing here, we would need additional parking to have to have restaurant uses. We have other room on the site to the rear of the existing property, and as the property goes to the south, you can see from the topo, it doesn't have very significant fall off for the first maybe 100 or so feet. So there could also be room for additional parking in the rear there. the back part of the property as it falls down is sort of natural drainage areas and would remain there. I don't see any use that the applicant has for it. It's way too far removed from Sashbaugh Road. So, two things is we have retained a traffic consultant to address traffic, although we don't have a report prepared yet, and they too are in need of some more specific ideas of our uses before they can complete their report. They have already been in touch with the traffic consultants at NOAC and Frous, as well as the Oakland County Road Commission, and as part of their proposal to us, have already found out from those agencies what they would like to see in the traffic report in order to address. And really, they want to see what's in addition to going on in and out of this site, as well as the Tim Hortons site, because as you had mentioned, people that wanted to go left and north also could traverse through there, where there's another boulevarded entrance north of the Tim Hortons site. Tim Hortons doesn't have any direct access. It's got a boulevard on each side and a cross that goes in between them. So, you know, Fishbeck will be engaged to work through the process of identifying the uses and any additional traffic needs that would be needed. The site does have a boulevard entrance, and that is a wide boulevard. That's wide enough for 2 lanes, so a right in, two lanes to turn in. But if there was to be left out traffic, there's room for a left cars to be stacked to go left, as well as to get out to go right. So a left turn would not slow a right turn access out. As we mentioned, you know, we will abide by the consent judgment terms. As far as uses, we again anticipate having to come back with a more formal site plan. That site plan will better identify uses at that time. We'll have done some level of parking calculation in respect of those uses, and provide where additional parking would be shown. As we kind of know, in today's world, the 15 gas pumps spots are quasi-parking spots too, because most people usually, as we all do, park their car, pump their gas, and then run into the convenience store. They don't usually pull out into a spot. So we'll incorporate those spots into parking calculations. And if you're not ready to take action or require more information from us that we don't have today, we're certainly prepared to come back and address them. Frankly, wanted to get your thoughts. I mean, generally it seems that, subject to these parameters, that this is the appropriate use of the property, that to try and operate it as a separate office parcel doesn't make sense, and we looked at having a separate building. It just doesn't make sense. Too much ingress and traffic manipulation. It's very smooth. We've spoken, you know, the chief has chimed in. We have, sufficient room. The chief had some concerns about the back of the property. However, remember that we've also got 12 feet where cars are stacked in a stacking lane. If the building was burning, I can't imagine they would be waiting for their food. And if the chief had his horns going, I'm sure they would move their way out of the drive-through lane. So the width there definitely expands. That's not a parking lane or anything like that where a car would be permanently situated. But of course, we're prepared to address the chief. As far as utilities, we're putting this on the grid, if you will. It's a well septic propane site right now. It'll connect into the water system where there's a main right there at the property. Sewer will get brought down from the Tim Hortons site to access this property. I think we have to get our gas on the other side of Sashbaugh, so we would do a bore there, or consumers would bore that. So we're enhancing the utilities. So that's what we're here for. We just kind of wanted to see that this is something that the township would consider a benefit and a proper use. We are prepared to come back, move through the process, get your recommendation once we have a better idea. Like I said, I don't anticipate anything, and I'll discuss with the ownership what type of other restrictions we could propose to you. We're certainly willing to propose out of a lot of the non-desirable type things, but as far as the more practical concerns, which are the parking and traffic aspect, or, yeah, the parking and traffic aspects of it, we don't envision really a sit-down restaurant where you're gonna have a waiter and a waitress. I frankly envision, like I said, a smoothie user or a coffee user on the end cap and some type of a, they call fast casual, you know, I don't like to use names. Absolutely, please.
Good evening, everyone. Just to add to the story of the business, this is our first time coming to a board and try to expand a building or rezoning. So we're here, I'm here. I hired the right people to kind of guide me through it. I've met a couple of times with the planning commissioner and just ask questions because I was new to the area. But just to give you some ideas of what we're trying to do, definitely beautifying the site and giving it more service. The addition that has not been mentioned and has not been discussed, we're building the future of these C-stores, gas stations. We're adding EV charging units off of 75. We're going to be a mainstay with that site. There's a lot going on in that world and where we're going. So there is no hurry to do anything. We're interested to see how would you like to see this beautified. But there's a lot that could happen on that site, including adding a food concept inside the store. So studying all this and knowing what competition is coming to Michigan, we're preparing for tomorrow to compete, and not only that, have a long stay in the game. So there is no ask of, hey, we want to do this carte blanche, but we need guidance, and if we will work with you accordingly. But this property is sitting there doing nothing for the last few years until my neighbor, Mr. Silverman, called me about a year and a half ago and says, hey, you want to do something here? And I don't know if it was ever brought to the township, but there was a Honda dealership that wanted to move. And that was handled by Mr. Silverman, and then that deal fell through. And then I kept thinking, hey, we could use a bigger store. There could be another concept. I fished around on who would be interested. There's been a funny, you said a chicken sandwich place, or I've gotten a call from that kind of industry. Another place that called was a small burger joint, and none of them really serve a sit-down restaurant. This is all fast casual restaurants. But what we're trying to do is make it really one of the better looking stations, state-of-the-art, adding EV charging, making it more of a prominent stay than just a gas station and C-store since we bought it in 2018. So if you've ever visited, I hope you see the improvement, but we really want to take it to the next level. So that's all. Thank you.
Could you state your name and address for the person who's taking the minutes, please?
Absolutely. My name is Isaac Hanna, Izzat. I go by Isaac. And would you like my address, you said?
Please.
1651 Hamlet Drive, Troy, Michigan.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for the added information too. It was helpful.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So this is, we are required by law to hold a public hearing, so I'm going to use my gavel again because I really like doing it. I'm going to open the public hearing for anyone who wants to speak on this item. No? Seeing no one, I'm going to use my gavel again and close the public hearing.
Nobody online?
Anybody on, yeah, let me read. Anyone online? Did I miss anyone online? Member of the public? I did not. Okay, good. So the public hearing remains closed. I think that the report and the make it quick.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so if you have any questions for us, and again, if you're not prepared to take action today, we're prepared to submit a concept plan that has additional information, and would schedule with Brian an opportunity to come back. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So in my opinion, based on the report that was very clear and based on the comments and the questions from the planning commission members, I think we've given direction. I think our comments are consistent with the report. We need a little bit of information, more formally submitted information. I liked everything I heard from both people that spoke on behalf of the applicant. I think the path forward is good, is bright. But we're not ready to take definitive action in terms of an approval this evening.
I think the overall attitude of the board is that we're in favor of the project.
Correct. We're in favor conceptually, we just need the details. I think I think we provided feedback, Mr. Oppman. Do we need to take any action on?
You're gonna need to postpone it.
Yeah, it's a postponement. That way
So-
they have the time to come
Okay.
back at a later date.
Yeah,
What's that?
could I add something?
Absolutely.
So I guess I agree with what everybody's been saying. I think from a use standpoint, it makes sense to me. I'm always happy when somebody's looking to invest in their property, and it sounds like you guys are earnestly looking to beautify it, so good with that. The only comments I would have is just to make sure that parking does work. We'd want to see that, obviously. I know you've got people that can provide that information. I'm also concerned about aesthetics. I mean, this is gonna be I think the visibility is quite a bit from the freeway. Now you're getting closer to it. I'm not saying, put a whole landscape, tree buffer to block your building, because I know you want to have that visibility, but I do want to see some landscape, and I think we want to see it beautified and not just have that building, with the lights right up to the freeway. So I'm just thinking aesthetics, I'm thinking landscaping, that sort of thing.
Yep, good feedback. I agree with that. So, I think, so I'll make a motion then. I motion we postpone this item, to provide the applicant time to address the concerns identified in the Carlisle Workman Associates report, as well as comments and concerns by the planning commission.
Support.
We have a motion and a support. Any discussion? Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Galley,
Yes.
Mr. Lockren,
Yes.
Mr. Mazza,
Yes.
Mr. Patel is absent, Mr. Ritchie.
Yes.
Chairman Sabada.
Yes.
Ms. Tully, yes.
Look forward to seeing the next rendition. You've come before us.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item is item F2, PC file number 2023-002, miscellaneous zoning ordinance text amendments, revisions to section 6.08C and 7.03E relating to limiting the number of extensions that an applicant can request for site plans and special uses. Also clarification that the extensions are good for 1 year. Mr. Carlisle, are you gonna present this?
Yeah, as soon as I can find it.
Okay. Take your time.
I've covered it up. The first proposed amendment, it's pretty clear on the agenda that what this is proposing to do is to limit both for site plans and special land uses. We have language in the ordinance that permits the planning commission to extend the approval without limitation. The time is extension, but the number of times you can request an extension don't have any limitations in the ordinance. What this ordinance amendment, both of these ordinance amendments say that for either a site plan or a special land use, no more than 2 extensions, 2 one-year extensions can be granted. So very simply, that's what these both are intended to do.
Questions? I've got some. I don't know if they're for you or for Brian. This was initiated by who or what?
Township Board.
Township Board? I forget how many years I've been on the planning commission. I'm gonna guess 5, plus or minus. I think we've seen 1 request for an extension.
I counted in the last 20 years, 3 different projects.
So 3 projects. So once every 7 years, we have an extension request. So has there been a problem with granting extent, like is there problem sites that are a result of extending site plan approval? No?
No, I haven't.
I guess, seems to be a solution searching for a problem to me. I'm thinking of what we just went through on planet Earth the last few years. We had COVID, which affected the construction industry for a couple of years. Then we had rampant, unpredictable prices of lumber and concrete and windows and doors and doorknobs and nails. And I mean, I got a builder contractor right here next to me. Limiting the number of extensions to 2 years seems arbitrary to me. If nothing's changed, if the planning commission reviewed and approved the site plan in a public meeting and nothing's changed, it just seems arbitrary to cap it at 2 years. I guess I'd like to know what the problem is. And am I missing something?
Just to comment a little bit about some of the things, I think, I'm trying to recall exactly what we said the night at the township board meeting, but it was pretty much, it's like if you keep extending the extensions, maybe there's things that happen in the township that changed, even ordinances or whatever, and if you didn't limit it, how do you make them come back and maybe comply with new needs or ordinances that might have changed during the time? So it basically was brought up more in a general comment, I think, that, shouldn't there be some limit on the number of times you can do that? It's not saying you're denying it, you're making them come back to maybe meet all the new criteria that might have changed during which would be essentially up to a 3-year period, right? So.
Well, I guess I understand that, but things happen, and again, the lumber prices and concrete prices, and just not only concrete prices, but just the ability to get a concrete truck to show up at your site and pour concrete. There's some market condition, and hire laborers, and there's some market conditions that could potentially affect this. And has there been a site plan that we granted an extension that became a problem site? I saw Mr. Ottman shake his head. Have we granted extensions more than once for a site plan? Okay. Was there a problem with that site plan? No. So I guess what I'd rather see is the 2-year number seems arbitrary to me, and I'd rather tie it to, have conditions changed? Have, conditions related to the site, conditions related to the neighborhood, conditions related to township policy, just to limit to 2 extensions, I guess I'm not seeing it. But I'm only one vote, but I'm not seeing it. I think I want to.
So the 2 extensions would give them 3 years, though, is that?
We have 1 year for the first approval, and then 2 extensions, each one's a year.
Yep.
So-
What would be the downside to approving this? Is there a downside? It seems like it puts a little more control over potential changes in ordinances and different things like that. Gives more control to the township, or?
Well, in my opinion, it does give significantly more control to the township, because a petitioner could go through the process, get extended twice, and then they're done, and they gotta come back.
And then they'd have to review the site plan again and approve.
Resubmit, start all over again, yeah. So,
I
again,
see- I see your point of view
Yeah.
too, with everything we've been through, but,
I'm only one vote, and we're just a recommending body, but those are my thoughts, is I'd rather not cap it at 2 years, but I understand that we want good development, I get that, but I think I'd rather tie it to change conditions and maybe putting more of a burden on the developer for explaining why the extension's needed. But again, we're just a recommending body, I'm just sharing my
Public hearing?
So, anyone else want to say anything before? Good comment, good feedback, by the way. Anyone else before I open the public hearing, want to add? I'm going to open the public hearing.
I did want to add.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never seen it happen here, but you're not obligated to grant the exception. It doesn't, nothing in our ordinance says that you shall grant it if it's requested. Just, I want the commission to be aware of that, but, you know, there's never been, that I can remember.
Never had that problem.
Never had a compelling reason not to grant an extension. In most cases, there are always legitimate reasons. Financing, can't get a certain easement, for example, or working on getting an easement. Permitting is a real problem. You know that, don't you? So, whatever you decide on here, whatever you do, it needs to be reasonable, you know? Now, is this unreasonable? No, I don't think so. But you always have the authority not to grant the extension if you choose, if you feel conditions have changed. So, we could actually modify the language to even make that more clear, rather than limiting the total number of extensions. That's another option.
What are other municipalities doing? Aren't you with, you guys are with Troy or?
Yeah, so, I don't have it in front of me, but we provide more time. It is time, but we provide more time, and we also provide, more defined standards for granting the extension. I think 2 years is, I don't think 2 years is enough. I think we need to be a little bit more flexible with, like,
Do other municipalities give more than like a 2-year extension, or is that?
Mr. Carlisle works with significantly more communities than I do. He'd be the one that I would defer the
Yes.
question to.
You
So
know,
other,
it varies,
yeah,
you know, it varies.
but what do you see?
It
From
varies.
2
I mean,
years to, I mean, it's all over the
Yeah.
board?
2 years, 3 years.
What's the longest you've seen?
Boy, can't answer that question accurately. Wouldn't want to answer that and mislead you.
Is there any place like Independence that just allows continual,
Oh, certainly.
yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
But to your point, we don't necessarily allow it. We can just, as a commission, we could decide, hey, they put in an elementary school playground there. We can't put that factory next to it now. It just doesn't make sense.
Right.
We're denying your extension.
Right. On a case-by-case basis,
don't-
if conditions have changed,
We
can-
don't have to approve any extension as long as we have a valid reason.
No, you don't. I mean, and whether the ordinance, whether you are able to, whether the language in the ordinance is sufficient for you to interpret it that way, that, you know, I would want to make sure
That's the issue.
that it's there. But I will tell you that it's not, you are not obligated to grant an extension.
right.
See, my concern was that we would have a site that would just sit there in, you know, sort of under construction and be an eyesore in the area. But evidently, that's not something that we generally see, right?
Well, but that's a different issue. I mean,
Yeah.
that's when they've already started, and we have had that. That where you have a project that started and stopped, but that's a whole different issue. You can't, that,
Yeah, once
Yeah,
they
it's a
pull the
permit
permit,
issue.
this stops.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a separate department at that
Yeah.
point.
That's a separate type of issue. In this case, the only downside is, I mean, you have a piece of property that nothing's happening on. You know, you haven't grant, you grant an extension and they still, you know, there's no downside with the fact that it hasn't proceeded necessarily unless you feel that it's compelling to have a project proceed. But on the other hand, the other good point is that there may be ordinance standards that do change. And they would, you know, with the extension, they are entitled to continue under the approval that they were granted. But this is where I'm saying is that if those kind of circumstances change, you don't have to grant the extension. We just haven't had that circumstance with only
Right.
three plans that have been granted extensions. We just haven't had that circumstance.
I guess what I strive for as a planning commission member is balance between reasonableness to the developer, reasonableness to the neighbors and the township. We get good development that doesn't negatively impact anybody. And this seems a little bit heavy-handed on the part of the applicant. But again, the goal is reasonableness. We want development that's gonna benefit, that's gonna work. So, it's not my hill to die on, but I would go for either removing the maximum number of times that I'd be most comfortable with strengthening the standards and eliminating the maximum number of times an applicant can seek renewal, or capping it at a bigger number, 3 or 4 years. That's what I would like to see. Again, if the site's vacant and nothing changes, what's the problem? There's no problem. But if conditions change, then, so that's, I've already said enough.
Public hearing got cut short.
I opened it. Does anyone who wants to speak in this item? Seeing people shake their heads, no. I'll close the public hearing. What direction does the board want to go in? Go ahead.
Well, I think it's the same thing. I don't necessarily think I want to die on a hill on this. I actually don't have a problem with the limitation. I mean, I think things do change over time, and frankly, if we get a better plan, 4 or 5 years down the road than what was approved 4 or 5 years ago, things do change. So, I'm very sensitive, obviously, to, issues developers may have to get something started. Maybe 3 years isn't enough. I probably agree with that, but I don't have an issue with having a limitation, because that gives the impetus to either build or, another project will
Yep.
come and we'll have review of that. So maybe it's 3 years. I don't know. I mean, but that's sort of where my mind is going. I don't think we have to do this. At the same time, I don't really have an issue with the limitation, as long as it's fair. And 3 years, that should be enough time, but, and again, we can't deny it, obviously, each year. I would lean a little bit more maybe towards a full 4 years.
Yep. Okay. Does anyone want to move a resolution?
Well, we talked about strengthening the standards. Is that something we need to do besides changing this time frame at this time?
Well, does anyone else, does anyone feel that 2 years is not long enough? The two extensions is not enough?
I mean, I think 3 years, is a good one. It kind of gives you some limitation. And to me, if you're a developer, it's like, hey, I got to get something done, or I'm going to have a whole lot of explaining to do, or begging to do, or something to come back. So
So you're saying you're good with what it's written, or another
no,
extension?
I'm saying I'd be okay with 3 years, 3 extensions.
3 extensions, okay.
But
So total of
having
4
some,
years then.
have some kind of time frame, ending that,
Mhm.
hey, if you don't get it done before here, you gotta come back, and there might be new criteria you have to meet
And
at that time.
the biggest issue is they have to come back with a site plan. I mean, this
Mhm.
isn't,
Yeah, it's
Right.
essentially starting over again,
Yeah.
so there might be different expectations.
right.
That's one of the things you lose, I guess, if you have to come back. You
Absolutely.
might have to meet a higher standard than you did originally, so.
I agree.
Could they come back with the same site plan and just reapply?
Sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They could.
So, I mean, it would really be limited costs in that aspect if you're not changing anything,
Yeah.
so.
Unless there's been turnover on the board, or unless
Right.
the ordinance has changed, the master plan has changed, or,
I mean, I agree with what you said, Brent, but I like the proposal the way it is.
so one who likes it as is, 2 who don't feel strongly you could support an extra year,
Yes.
2 that don't. What do you think?
I guess, taking the last 2 or 3 years as an example, I can envision why you would have needed more. I hope to God that doesn't happen again in my
Mhm.
lifetime.
It will. What do you say?
According to Mr.
Who said
Ottman,
that?
it's,
Said it will.
there's only been 3 times we've extended a plan in 20 years, so,
Mhm.
again, it's probably you're-
1 or 2 of those probably
Doesn't really need to be
the
adjusted.
development died
Right.
anyway, right? So, like the
One-
hospital was
One was
one.
the hotel, and they ended up coming back.
dry
And
cleaning.
in that particular instance, the standards had changed, because it was in the overlay district at that point. So they did have to modify their site plan, and the building was modified, but, the Wellbridge project, that was extended several times.
Have you guys ever seen a contingent offer on a piece of commercial property that was contingent on them getting the site plan approval?
Happens all the time.
Every time.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that might be a concern too, that a piece of property that is gonna be tied up with a contingent offer, other buyers aren't gonna be interested in it because it's tied up, they're working on a site plan, which might be, you know, the way it's written might be a little bit better.
Well, but we don't I mean, that's the private part of the transaction. We don't have any control over that, where there's a contingency in the sales agreement that it's.
But you got a piece of property that's sitting in the township that might,
I know, but what I'm saying is that if a seller agrees to a contingency in a sales agreement to not close until the buyer has site plan approval, we have no,
nothing to do with the township,
we don't
right?
even know about it most of
Okay.
the time, you know?
If someone wants to move the I mean, I'm open to move this along. We're a recommending body, and that's our role in this, is to recommend. So,
I'll make a motion to, move forward as written.
okay, we have a motion, do we have a support? Don't all speak at once.
I think everybody wants more time allowed from the discussion.
Okay, so we have a motion that was not supported, so, Mr. Mazza, would you be willing to revise your motion and, with the suggestion that the, number of extensions be extended to 3?
I mean, I'm good with the way it's written.
Okay,
Maybe someone else might.
okay, that's fine. So we have a motion that died. There's no second. Does someone else want to, take a stab at making a motion?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve, or to recommend PC file 2023-002, revisions to 6.08C and 7.03E, relating to limiting the number of extensions that applicant can request for site plans and special land uses, with the additional change that the extensions shall be no more than 3 extensions.
So we have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second, any discussion? Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Galley,
Yes.
Mr. Lockren,
Yes.
Mr. Mazza,
No.
Mr. Patel absent, Mr. Ritchie,
Yes?
Chairman Savadan?
Yes.
Ms. Tully, yes.
So again, we're a recommending body. This will go before the Township Board for consideration. They will consider our recommendation, but at the end of the day, they can do whatever they wish to do with this recommendation.
It is.
Next item is item F3, PC file number 2023-002, miscellaneous zoning ordinance text amendments, revisions to section 10.03E and 12.06H relating to dual ordering stations for uses that require a drive-through. Mr. Carlisle.
Yeah, it's on.
The second amendment is, as we discussed, as it was previously presented to the commission, is to allow dual ordering stations, not dual drive-throughs, but dual ordering stations associated with drive-throughs. Again, the recognition that that industry has changed quite a bit. It actually can be a benefit to moving traffic and reducing potential congestion. It seems to be something that's designed for customer convenience. We've had 2 approved by the ZBA, so it's obvious that we probably should do something about the ordinance. So it's pretty simple.
It's when the exception becomes the norm.
Yeah.
And this is exactly how the ZBA, the relationship with ZBA should work. When there's a pattern of applications that the ZBA is seeing, you consider amending the
Right.
zoning ordinance to address that, so.
Yeah.
Any questions for Mr. Carlisle?
I think it's a positive because when people make their own line, it's not always the best situation.
Yeah. I'm gonna open the public hearing now. Would anyone like to comment on this, seeing head shake? I'm going to close the public hearing at 7 o'clock. Bring it back to the planning commission for discussion. This has been, I think there's been consensus on this from the moment Mr. Carlisle presented this to planning commission. With that, I'll make a motion that we recommend approval of the text amendment as presented this evening.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? We have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Galley,
Yes.
Mr. Lockren,
Yes.
Mr. Mazza,
Yes.
Mr. Patel absent, Mr. Ritchie,
Yes.
Chairman Savada.
Yes.
Ms. Tully, yes.
Okay. Next item is regular business. Item G1 is PC file number 2023-002, miscellaneous zoning ordinance text amendments, revisions to section 14.02, ZBA PC liaison regarding requiring the PC liaison to the ZBA to be a resident of the township.
This also was an amendment initiated by the township board. We discussed it last month, but I placed it back on the agenda to have any, if we want to have any further discussion, to either move it along or not. So it's certainly up to the commission on what you want to do with it.
So I was on vacation last month and missed the discussion at planning commission. Thank you for sharing the meeting, Mr. Galley. So I wasn't able to share my opinion of this. I can tell you that in my experience, it's really difficult to get people to volunteer to serve on committees for municipalities, and it's not gonna get any easier in the future. I'm only aware of one board member in the township who's not a resident, and he's sitting to my right. I don't understand why we're considering this. Just my experience with this particular, I'm not trying to gush over you, Mr. Galley, but you're well prepared, you show up every meeting, you've lived in the township longer than I have. You spend more time during the daylight hours in the township than I do. I don't see the issue. I think you're an excellent member of the planning commission, and I've heard from zoning board of appeals members that you're an excellent ZBA member, so I guess be careful what you ask for, because we've got a very strong ZBA member who's willing to serve and shows up at every meeting, and then we're gonna eliminate this person from the ability to serve on the ZBA. It makes no sense to me. If, I understand this is a election platform of at least one member of the township board, and that's fine. But the supervisor has the ability to not appoint people to boards, so if this is a platform issue, then when the term's up, he can decide to reappoint someone else. So I think this is a solution searching for a problem. I think we wanna, when we have good members, the Township Planning Act allows for one member of the planning commission to not be a resident. That's state law. We're just consistent with state law. I see no reason to circumvent it, and I just think this is not a good idea. This is not good governance, in my opinion. But I'm only one vote again. Anyone else?
Although Mr. Galley may have been the target, I feel like this question is not about him. It's about, do we want to maintain this option for special circumstances? Maybe there's someone that, you know, would be crucial to be here for a certain project, or I don't know what might happen, but I think we need to talk about, do we want to retain this option?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. If it came across that I was inferring that Mr. Galley was a target, that I wasn't, but I guess the way I'm looking at it is we have a member now. It does impact us today, insofar we have a ZBA member who's happy to serve on the ZBA, and speaking for myself, I'm not ready to serve on another board or committee. I mean, this is enough time as it is, and it does have impacts down the road, and but your point is well taken. Your point is well taken. I appreciate that.
I mean, we're giving, I mean, potentially giving up that option,
Right,
you know.
right. Yes,
Yeah, I'll just put my 2 cents worth in here, but, you know, I think this is more of a, like a campaign optics, move than anything else, that, the township supervisor and the township board has the right to, vet and appoint, members of the planning commission. And, if they feel they're not, appropriate person to be on the planning commission or the, ZBA, then they should, you know, that they should be appointing that person. So, to me, you know, once they've been vetted and voted upon, like you say, it gets back to what Ms. Tully was saying, is like you're taking one of the options away
right,
from the board. So, if the person, you know, is a non-township resident, but per the law of appointing people to the planning commission, it's allowed, then that person should be, have the full rights of any other member that's on the planning commission as well, so. And like you say, if the, you know, kind of goes to other aspects, like if, you know, on the Supreme Court, if, you know, it was appointed by another president, and now a new president's in, it's like, he
Mhm.
gets to appoint whatever he wants to appoint.
That's
I
right.
guess. And I guess that's what I feel, it's like, the township supervisor, when there's openings, he can appoint, the, you know, obviously it has to be approved by the whole township board and everything as well, but, basically, that person gets to be vetted and talked about and voted on. And, to me, this is just, they're trying to put a nefarious meaning on, what's happening, to make it sound like, you know, I'm saving the day or whatever, so. I just, to me, I agree with you, it's a solution searching for a problem or a reason anyway, so.
yeah,
And like I said, I just think the township supervisor has the capability of nominating and appointing people, to all the boards as they come open, so. To me, this is something that's not needed, and no action should be taken in my mind, but.
go ahead.
I've got the highest respect for Brian, but I'd like to see this go before like a public hearing, just to see what the public has to say about it, get their input. Nothing to do with,
Well, that's what it would do if we move forward with it, so.
that's what it's set up for, if we move forward as a public hearing, right?
Well, we speak as a body, so we act, we speak by resolution, so if a majority of, if there's a motion and a support, and a majority of the planning commission wants to move this forward and hold a public hearing, we certainly could, but we speak by resolution, so. If anyone wants to make a motion, then now's the time.
I'd like to make a motion to move it forward to a public hearing.
Okay, we have a motion, do we have a second?
Is a public hearing part of the requirement for this? Yeah.
Yeah, it's an ordinance amendment, so you would be, you would have to, you have to have a public hearing, yes.
So we have a motion to move it forward, do we have a second?
No, just speaking on this, you know, I agree with what you're saying. You know, in some way, I feel that it might be important to at least get the public input on it. What I'm concerned about is, you know, once that happens, I think if we decide to deny it, it would still go to the board anyway. But of course, the board is the one that makes the ultimate decisions as well. So, I guess I'm kind of torn between, I don't think it's necessary, and I do understand why it's in front of us, which I don't necessarily appreciate that being put on the planning commission's shoulders. The other part of this is, we have elections, and you know, ultimately, the board is the ultimate arbiter, and we do have a public hearing process. So I'm a little bit torn by it. I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, obviously, I have zero time to serve on another board, so if there's, somebody needs a seat, it's not gonna be me. I know what that means, you know, otherwise, but I think Brian obviously is, well, I said this last time, he's more than capable, and we're happy to have him. So I don't know if that means maybe there's some language that says it applies all future, you know, board members. But regardless, I'm kind of torn with, should this go to a public hearing just for all those things I said?
I think that's a great idea. Verbiage that says future board members, which allows Brian to continue to serve.
Well, he is automatically, that's been determined by the township attorney.
What's that?
The township attorney has already said that he's gonna finish out his term.
What I'm saying after that,
For the next term, and
he could be appointed again,
He could be.
and just in his case. And then in the future, they need to be a resident.
I don't understand why this has to go forward, because the way I understood it, it was already written in the, I don't know, I guess it's not the law, but, you went through it.
No,
Last
it's not.
time
It's
did-
the zoning enabling act, or the planning act allows a non-resident member, or a non-resident to be appointed to the planning commission.
Mhm.
That is a recent, that provision in the law was passed in 2008. Where what that has created is also for the ability of that individual, whoever they are, to be the planning commission representative on the zoning board of appeals. I think part of the question you have to ask is, what's the difference of being on the Board of Appeals as a non-resident than being on the Planning Commission? You make bigger decisions at this level, but I do understand, you know, why some may think that having a non-resident is for some reason a problem.
Being a resident or a non-resident doesn't change the ability of somebody.
Well, I
To
mean,
be-
residents on the Board of Appeals are
Crooked.
frequently torn,
To put it plainly.
are frequently torn on issues coming before them because their residents ruling on requests by other residents. So,
So we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
And Judy, to answer your question, it's up to the purview of the commission to decide what to do with this. You can either recommend it for public hearing, or take no action, or have it revised. There's multiple ways you can handle this.
Yeah, but I guess my understanding was that it's in the documents by which we operate that the planning commission can, I guess, choose a non-resident to be on the Board of Appeals.
correct.
So that's our legal way we do business right now. So if someone wants to change that, what would that take?
What's before you tonight? This amendment to your zoning ordinance. That you can't do it, when this question was asked of me by the person that has proposed this, I said, the only way you can deal with this is by amending your zoning ordinance. You can't have a policy, that's not appropriate. The only way you can this can be legally binding is to put it in the zoning ordinance.
And the planning commission is the commission to do that?
No, you are the body that has to hear, has to study and consider proposed amendments to the ordinance and then make a recommendation to the township board. That's what you just did with the dual ordering stations. So you're being asked to consider this language. In order for it to move forward in any fashion, you would have to set a public hearing and then make a decision after the public hearing in terms of what you're gonna recommend to the township board. If you don't, choose to not to consider it, then, you need to at least have, I think you need to put that in the form of a motion and state your reasons.
Right now, we still have a motion on the table without a second.
You will still, having the public hearing, you still have the ability to make a recommendation that it not go forward to the township board.
But it still would, correct?
It would have to, yes.
See, because my feeling is we may give up something important that we can't describe at the moment, but might be needed in the future. And we're giving that up for no reason that I can see.
And you would hope that if the majority of this board or this commission is persuasive enough that the township board will listen to you. If you follow the process and consider the amendment and make your recommendation. I guess I have to be honest, I think a concern I have is that our job here as the commissioners is not to question motivation. Our job here is to consider potential language, and this has actually been a referral from the township board. The whole township board referred it, right, Ron?
Yes.
I think out of respect for your respective positions, you should go forward with having a public hearing. And you use that as a fact-finding thing, and then you make your recommendations in the township board. And again, hope that whichever way you go, it's persuasive enough that the board would, I'm just concerned that we're setting a precedent here where something's been referred to by the township board or the duly elected representatives, and for the planning commission at least not to do all of your due diligence and consider and do what you would normally do. Just set a public hearing. You don't have to agree with what's necessarily said. I think all these things that I've heard tonight are all legitimate things, and it's a unique circumstance, it really is.
No, I appreciate everything you just said. I think it was well stated. Having said that, we are stewards of our master plan, and we are stewards of our zoning ordinance. And the authority today lies with the supervisor and the township board to not appoint a non-township resident to the planning commission. That authority exists today.
That's correct.
So this is bad governance, in my opinion. It's unnecessary when a non-resident's term is up, the supervisor and township board can decide to not reappoint that person or appoint that person. The authority is there today. This is a waste of our time. So I'll ask one more time. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Hearing no one, we move on to the.
Second.
We have a second.
Okay.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Galley,
No.
Mr. Lockren,
Yes.
Mr. Mazza,
Yes.
Mr. Patel is absent, Mr. Ritchie,
No.
Mr. Sabadan.
No.
Ms. Tully, yes. How many was that?
3-3.
Does not move.
Motion fails.
Motion fails.
Next item is item G2.
Well, is there anybody want to make a motion? Well, I guess you don't really need to at this point, do you? So the motion to set the public hearing.
I think
motion
that's all we
fails.
could do.
Okay. Yeah.
Motion fails. Next item is item G2, PC file number 2023-002, miscellaneous zoning ordinance text amendments, revisions to Article 2, Section 8.04, relating to changes in the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act relating to child care facilities and child care institutions.
I'm going to continue to suggest postponement of this matter. You know, as we were keeping it on the agenda, but the information that I feel I need to properly advise you, I still am not able to get from the state, from state representatives about why they've made these changes. And until I have that, I won't be satisfied, I think, to be able to make a good recommendation to you. So I would request that you postpone this item.
I'll make a motion that we postpone PC file 2023-002 in order for our consultants to work with the state to clarify questions on the Child Daycare Facility Act.
Second. Discussion.
So Dick, what's our exposure? What's the timeline? What
Well,
What
as
is
far as
this?
the child care, the daycares, you're really not, there's no exposure, because you really don't have any choice. If the state grants, you know, there's a provision now where they can allow for one more child in a family daycare home and two more in a group daycare home. You have some authority over group daycare homes because we are permitted to treat that as a special land use. So if somebody comes forward and says, I've been granted permission for two more in a group daycare, you can say, you need to amend your special land use. The family daycare homes, they say that's a residential use of property, and I don't think there's anything we can do about that. But I think I don't think there's any urgency to make sure our ordinance lines up with that.
Well, that was my question. What if we do nothing
No-
ever on this?
Yeah, it's only in the fact that the language in the ordinance doesn't line up with the Enabling Act. That's the only downside. The bigger issue for me, Tim, is this child care institution issue, where they have completely changed the rules in terms of what's considered a residential use of property, and I don't fully understand it. I believe it opens up the door for other uses in a residential setting that are associated with this because of how they describe therapy and what has to be provided. And unless I have more information, I'm not prepared to advise you what to do about it. So I've presented it to you because it's out there, but so far I haven't been, as I have said to you, I am not ready to recommend that you move forward on it. I need more information.
Is it fair to say that this law as written could potentially negatively impact single-family residential neighborhoods?
Yeah, absolutely, in my opinion, yes. And I have no other information to say otherwise at this point.
Yep. On that note, I think, we have a motion and support. Yeah.
I just want to ask a question. Does this affect, like adult foster care or
No.
daycare? Is
No.
only
But
like minor children? That's it?
It does not, but again, part of my concern is this is the sort of the camel's nose, into the tent. That this has happened, and now it may give license to declaring other types of uses, residential uses of property, that are rehabilitation in facilities, in nature, okay? I can't do anything about that, you can't do anything about that, that's something of our legislature. This is something that you couldn't do in terms of expressing to your legislator your concern about what they've done here. What's very interesting is that when there's legislation passed in the state of Michigan, right on to the state website, you look it up, and you look at the legislative reports. There's a legislative report, and there's fiscal reports, fiscal impact reports. These reports are so sketchy about this that it makes me believe this was something that was just rushed through without much thought, because some legislator had a constituent that runs some kind of institution of this nature and needs to have this in the law. What's to me very concerning is that they've changed the whole rules to say 10 residents now is a residential use of property, which now I think raises the potential that all other things that were formerly considered residential uses of property at 6 to now begin to challenge that number. And that is the concern. I think the legislature's done something of great concern here.
And not only 10 residents, but the additional staff that would be
Totally.
required to
Well,
provide
especially,
service.
yeah, especially when you're involved in, and especially when what is described here is a therapeutic type of care, which means you gotta have more staff. Part of it is, it's children that have suffered from trauma, from abuse, which nobody has, everybody has sympathy about that. But the treatment that's described here is, the program must have a family treatment program and must have aftercare, meaning 6 months after release or leaving the setting, there has to be a continuation of care. So what does this mean? It just means this is all gonna be done out of a single-family residence, and you'll have potentially 10 residents and their families, and then the 10 people that have been there 6 months later to come back for, I just think that this is not well thought out piece of legislation. So,
But no one is really asking us to do anything.
well,
Right. I
no,
mean, I
yes,
couldn't
they
figure
are.
out
They've
what-
changed the law.
So do we have a role in that then? And
You have a role that you have to recognize it in your ordinance, but I'm not suggesting you move forward, in simply accepting, what this means, because, I'm interpreting this legislation as I read it, and from the reports I have reached out to state legislators and have gotten no response about what does this really mean? So, until we have more information, I don't think we should move forward on it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying 100%. It's just that as I was reading it, I couldn't understand if we have a role.
The only role you have is to, if it's something like this, right now, if something like this is proposed, and it meets the state requirements now, the state law, you may not have any choice about it.
Yeah.
Like our ordinances don't allow, home, businesses that, have traffic and parking and stuff at a residential home. So, I mean, I think that's what Dick's getting at, is that we have ordinances that we'd have to review to make sure, they're not denying or infringing on this
You know,
right now. so.
With group daycare homes, the law still permits you for a group daycare home, which is 7 or more residents or 7 or more children to be in a daycare. You can treat that as a special land use, and the law allows you to do that. It has. So even with that amendment, with the addition of additional children to that, I'm not that concerned about that, because you'll still have control over that. But this new use that they're now allowing 10 residents as a residential use of property, to me, is a bad precedent. And I think we've just got to find out more before we move forward on it. Hopefully, there's going to be other people that recognize it too, and maybe they'll realize that they've made a mistake here. Maybe not.
And nobody denies the need for this type of service.
No.
It needs to be in an appropriate location.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, most single-family homes aren't big enough to accommodate 10 residents. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, maybe ones that Brian builds,
Couple,
So
not my house.
we have a motion and a second. If the motion was to postpone this item. There's no further discussion. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Galley,
Yes.
Mr. Lockren.
Yes.
Mr. Mazza.
Yes.
Mr. Patel's absent. Mr. Ritchie.
Yes.
Chairman Salvador.
Yes.
Ms. Tully, yes.
Item is postponed pending more feedback from the state. Item H, approval of minutes. We have regular meeting minutes of February 9th, 2023. Do we have a motion?
I
Motion,
recommend approval of the minutes of
February 9th.
February 9th, 2023.
I'll support Ms. Tully's motion.
We have a roll call vote on the minutes.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Lockton?
Yes.
Mr. Mazza?
Yes.
Mr. Patel is absent. Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Chairman Savadat?
I'll abstain.
Ms. Tully? Yes.
Minutes are approved. I knew you were gonna vote yes, so. I wasn't there, so,
That's true.
yeah. Next item, item I.
You'd watch it on TV, though.
Oh, yeah, when I
He
was in
was
St.
busy.
When
He
I
was
was in
busy.
St. Martin, I was watching this live. Item I, consultants reports, master plan update, Mr.
Yeah,
Carlo.
just real quickly, I believe we've come to a date with the chamber to do the Dixie, to do a chamber workshop, focusing on Dixie Highway for the master plan. We are gonna begin to start drafting, text for you to begin to review, because we feel like we've gotten quite a bit of public input here. But we do want to get through that because we think it'll support some of the work of the DDA, which, by the way, last night, the DDA board approved the DDA plan. Now it goes on to public hearing to the township board. So that's all positive, because now for some of the things that come out of your master plan, there'll be a means to finance it. So that's it.
Excellent.
In a nutshell. I'm going to, by the way, depart now, hopefully to avoid any snow that's flying.
Yep, drive safely.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Next item, item J, discussion, section 5.11, maintenance of farm animals, reduction of 3-acre requirement for class 3 animals, and which are defined as chickens and other animals weighing less than 75 pounds. I suspect we have someone in the audience who is interested in this.
She spoke at the ZBA, I believe, 2 or 3 times now,
Yep.
and at the planning commission as well.
That random person who just hugged next to my wife, in case anyone's curious.
Got in
Um,
trouble.
In case anybody's wondering why she's talking.
Yeah, in case anyone's wondering why Mr. Carlo's hugging some woman in the audience. Do you have anything to present, Ms. Rahman?
Well, we, the zoning board of appeals thought it was appropriate, during their deliberation of this case, to have the planning commission at least look at this ordinance, see if it might be modified or changed. I have a lot of reservation with that, being a director of a department that handles code enforcement. I can go into those litany of reasons why, but, I would not support changing this. This covers class 3 animals, which I provided in your packet. It's rabbits, ducks. We've had duck issues in the township. We've had, that people had as pets in their yard. Chickens, roosters, any kind of quote-unquote poultry, or any animal for that matter weighing under 75 pounds. So currently the ordinance allows any class 2 or 3 animal. Class 2 is horses, goats, the larger animals. Those are allowed also as farm animals, but you have to have at least 3 acres to have either a class 2 or class 3 animal. We see about 20 to 40 cases a year. If I look at the statistics on our code enforcement application, we get about 20 to 40 cases on class, any kind of animal problem, whether it's barking dog, chickens. And we just had a court case yesterday. Our code enforcement officer got a court order against somebody who had chickens on a parcel, near Cranberry Lake. So we get about 10 to 20 of the 20 to 40 cases are chickens on lots that are smaller than 3 acres. And, so it's a problem. And we've debated this in the office, how could we even regulate these? How do we regulate the coops? You know, does it require a land use permit? And how many are already out there that would essentially be grandfathered in on acreage over 3 acres? You know, if we make any kind of regulatory change, and how are the coops treated? Are they treated as accessory structures, which go against accessory structure square footage on a piece of property, which potentially puts people over that threshold of the maximum that they're allowed? You know, then what are the setbacks? That's a concern for us. Who's gonna check the setbacks? Our code enforcement officer? So, you know, I don't really want him trouncing around in yards, you know, with a measuring wheel, to check on these things. It's a burden that he's got a lot of other things to do, you know, besides this, and, you know, counting setbacks. Do we allow roosters? Do we not? Because the roosters typically are what make the noise. And, you know, quite honestly, we're not, is it botany? You know, we're not people who know what these animals are. You know, we're not trained in knowing, I mean, I think I know what a rooster looks like, but, you know, I'm not gonna, this also brings in prey animals, these things. So, yeah, you may have a big dog to fend off, you know, a prey animal like a hawk or a coyote, but, you know, you're just attracting prey animals into a neighborhood. The last thing I'll say is, there's a lot of subdivisions in our township that have greater than 1 acre lots. And they're subdivisions. You can drive up Eston Road, there's a couple of them that have over 1 acre of land on each parcel. The question is, and you know, do they have an HOA that's even active? Do they even have HOA rules against these type of animals? And if they don't, you're basically creating a backyard chicken environment in a subdivision. So, you know, that's always a negative impact of this. So that's the reason why I think there's too many unintended consequences if we were to change this ordinance at all. But that's, you know, it's certainly up to you guys to move this forward for a possible review. You know, but this is a pretty old ordinance, but at the same time, it's not a whole lot different than most communities around us. You know, so it's not, you know, it's not something that's outdated or anything like that. It's pretty comparable.
So we were not, there's been no direction provided from township board on this?
None. From the
No
township
direction.
board.
There hasn't been we haven't polled members to find out what the leanings are of the elected officials?
I've spoken with a few of them, and they would not be in support of changing it. But I will say that, you know, it's a touchy subject. We have maybe one case a year at the Zoning Board of Appeals. And, you know, the previous case was denied by the Board of Appeals. So most of the time, this ends up being a court order, and people get, you know, an order of injunctive relief, and they have to remove them within so many days. And we always work with the people, because a lot of times they are household pets to these people. You know, people treat them like their dogs. And there's nothing wrong with that, but unfortunately, it's against the ordinance. And I'm yet to see our judges here in district court rule against us for this type of situation. So, I don't want to get into the specifics of the Zoning Board of Appeals case. Mr. Galley may want to speak about the feelings of the ZBA, or maybe has his own opinions about this, but from a staff perspective, we would recommend not addressing this ordinance, but that's why it's under discussion, because it's certainly up to you guys as a planning commission.
Yeah, I guess just to summarize the ZBA case, I know, Mr. Auger had said, other municipalities have ordinances where they allow it, and he specifically named Royal Oak and such. I obviously didn't pull their ordinance, I don't know what it says. I think the general pulse of the ZBA was sympathy toward a possible change. However, what is that change? How is it paid for? How is it regulated? I appreciate Mr. Ottman's concerns. I mean, any costs, in my mind, would be borne by the permit holder, but what would that permit cost? And like you said, how do you regulate it and account for it? So, I guess that basically sums up the feelings of the ZBA in general.
I have a question for Brian. Say this ordinance passes, this proposed ordinance passes. A lot of HOAs have their own regulations.
They do.
So for example, in ours, you can't have outbuildings. And there are others that would probably conflict. So does that mean if something would pass, that it would make our own HOA regulations null?
No, you can still have regulations in your HOA to prohibit outbuildings, fences, all kinds
Yeah.
of applications. That's acceptable, but that's the question is a coop is not much different than what we consider in our ordinance, something that's under 200 square feet, a shed, or something like that, that's treated as a residential land use permit.
But not
So
in-
they have to meet setbacks and things like that. So, and if
We can't have
are these
sheds.
things gonna be open range, so to speak? Or you're gonna have to fence them in, most likely, and your subdivision may not even allow fences.
No fences, no sheds.
The short answer would be then is it would not be allowed in your subdivision, but if somebody put one in, you would have to enforce it.
Yeah, and a lot of times that burden becomes our situation from a township perspective, because the HOA will send multiple letters and, they get ignored, and then they call us and say, you guys enforce it, which we end up doing.
I don't understand what you meant, Brian, when you said that. What did you mean?
It would not be allowed in your subdivision because you can't have an outbuilding and you can't have a fence.
Right.
So if somebody put one in without permission,
That's
your
the
subdivision
HOA's.
HOA would tell them to remove it. If they
Right.
don't remove it, then you have to follow their proceedings and take them to court. Just like any other
Yeah.
ordinance violation or subdivision rule violation.
Mhm.
Yeah. Because I think, I don't know how many HOAs have those sorts of regulations.
Most.
Do
Yeah.
they?
Yeah.
So I think it would be very unpopular to, add anything like sheds and whatever, chickens, whatever.
So pragmatically, we have a resident sitting in the audience, who's gone before the ZBA, spoke at planning commission, completed a petition with over 200 signatures on it. There's clearly an interest on her behalf to move forward with this. What I don't want to do is really raise our expectations in terms of moving forward. So we encourage staff or the consultant to prepare a text amendment. We have a public hearing, we recommend approval. It goes to the township board and it's denied 7-0 because we don't know where the township board sits on this matter. So that's somewhat unfair to the resident. Also, we could argue somewhat unfair to the township board because we're initiating it and we don't know where they sit. So is there a way to get the temperature of the room for the township board so we're not spinning our wheels and wasting everyone's time and raising expectations?
I think that's a question for Mr. Ritchie.
Well, I guess I don't know what I guess I didn't try to poll or query
Yeah.
the boards. I didn't try to do that before, but I guess I know at least one or two of the people I talked to were not in favor of that, but
See, it-
of making the change. So
yeah, because I, at the, when you spoke, I'm pointing over, when you spoke at the planning commission meeting, I had not had, you kind of took me by surprise, and I didn't have an opportunity to talk to Mr. Galley beforehand and get his feedback in terms of what type of a potential burden this places on staff regarding enforcement. So, because I recognize this is chickens are really, and ducks and fowl, they're really trendy right now. But there's two sides to every story. So, I may have helped pump up your expectations a little bit, but again, this is an ordinance, this goes ultimately in front of the township board, and if they're not in support, then we're setting everyone up for failure here, and I don't wanna do that, so, but if I'm also on the township board, I'm gonna potentially be thinking to myself, well, that's the planning commission's job, let them set up the trial balloon and send it to us, and we'll vote on it, so,
part of what we talked about discussion-wise was like, maybe the modification would just, what would be the threshold if it's less than 3 acres, what's the number?
right,
Yeah, I think, this lady that spoke, I think you were asking for like one or 1.5?
She's on 1.14 acres, I think,
Okay.
1.17.
So I mean, that was like kind of the range she was, replying in, but I guess, when we talk about discussion, it's like it's at 3, what do we think the proper
Yeah.
number is? In my mind, 1 or 1.1 is not, because I live in a neighborhood that, the lots are that size and approximately, and
yeah,
I guess I don't necessarily want a chicken coop next to my house, so I guess I wouldn't be in favor of that, but it is 2.5, right? Do we need to have discussion on that size at all or not? And it's like, to me, even if we pick a number, maybe we wanna do some research on how many, subdivisions or whatever that might affect or whatever, so. Cause I mean, there's a threshold that, like say the burden on your staff is gonna go up dramatically, once we cross that threshold, so.
Yeah, I mean, our code enforcement officer handles over 400 cases, code enforcement cases a year. He picked up over almost 2,000 signs last year around the township. So, he's very active, but, I feel that the burden on us to, cause I handle all our land use permits, I review them, I check for square footage allotments, in the planning department, cause we work in conjunction with the building department to issue the permits. I feel like we're going to put people, a lot of times when people build accessory structures, pole barns, et cetera, they use all of their max allotted square footage they possibly can. And that means including extra garage space to get the maximum, and then we've got a chicken coop that's probably 100, 200 square feet in size, and it's over the square footage, and then how do we deal with it from a permit perspective? So that's the tricky part, and again, it's the regulation of it more than anything else. And it's more complicated than just changing the ordinance, to a certain acreage,
well, there's another issue you didn't mention that could potentially spring up, and that's, we get more and more, people with chickens, and then we realize that maybe the zoning board of appeals isn't the appropriate body to be considering variances for these, so we have to establish a separate animal control board or something like that, so now we have to appoint members, and we have to have a liaison for that, and we have to have meetings, and it potentially becomes an onion, but having said that, I get the desire for these, so I see the balance here. What holds a lot of weight with me is the 200 signatures. I mean, I haven't seen the petition, but 200 signatures is, I mean, The amendment section of the zoning ordinance literally says that it can be initiated by a petition of residents. Well, that's what it is. It's literally a petition. So I'm leaning towards moving in that direction. However, everyone has to have both eyes open, because if we do, I'm only one vote. If we do go in that direction, there's a very strong possibility that the efforts will be fruitless and the township board will not approve the text amendment. So that's, I'm just throwing it out there that this may go nowhere. And it may go nowhere with this, I'm only one person, there may not be a majority that wants to do that at the table here. So there's a lot of thresholds here moving forward for this, because I'm hearing from Mr. Ritchie this evening that there's at least 2 or 3 members that are no's. So I don't want to set anyone up for failure or heartbreak here.
Brian, what's I guess there were 2 variances before? Brian Galley. There were 2 variances before, so were they approved or what?
No, I think we've had 3 or 4 on small animals. We had I don't know what you call the small horses, and I don't know how much they weigh, but.
There were horses, mini horses on an acre.
Yeah.
That was denied during COVID, I think. The last case before Ms. Bill's case was last year, and it was on Almond Lane. She had chickens. She backed up to the school, so it really was on a corner lot. It seems pretty harmless, but she got denied similarly. You know, there's no practical difficulty, and you know, they followed the process to go through that, the denial.
Yeah, our logic was without any presence of a obvious hardship, if we're letting her do it on her acre, she's a responsible person, has a responsible coop, takes good care of them, it's clean, not a nuisance. But then we open it up to everybody else who has an acre, because there's not the presence of a real hardship.
And Ms. Bills lives in a neighborhood that is very small lots. It's an old established neighborhood at the north end of the township, but they're all small lots. She backs up to a large wetland, so what's really yard versus, you know, the point of her lot going out to the wetland, you know, versus what percentage is her home and yard is not even an acre, you know, it's significantly less.
Has
But-
she tried for a variance? And you went to ZBA and,
Yeah, it's just not appropriate. The situation isn't really appropriate for the ZBA.
that's what you were told?
Well, it's just not. I'm sorry, excuse me. Because of the practical difficulty.
You state your name and address just for the records.
Kelly Bills, 4890 East Princeton Avenue.
Thank you.
It's just not the appropriate route.
I agree with Mr. Galley with, you have someone like the Bills who take, you know, they own a business in the community, it's a pet store, they take great care of their pets, you know, they're a great family, but then you get someone that has chickens and they don't take care of them properly, and with birds, you know, you can get an odor, or it can be a mess, and I see your point of view too. Egg prices are through the roof. I own one of my businesses is a small restaurant, and I can see the need to, you know, have chickens and eggs, yeah, I don't know. Seems like,
Double-edged sword.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you know, as we've talked throughout this meeting about ordinances, you have to consider what's the law of unintended consequences when you're passing an ordinance, potentially. Or, you know, what Mr. Savanon said tonight, you know, was it bad government going after, you know, chasing after something, you know, it's just bad government. So, you know, you have to consider that in any ordinance amendment, whether it's about this issue or any issue for that matter.
and the township doesn't allow for a case-by-case basis.
Like a permit, yeah.
Yeah, we don't issue permits on it.
But that would give you the
A
able
yearly revocable permit.
to
if you're
personal,
not- If you have a complaint, you can
to allow
revoke
it
the
per
permit.
person.
You have to pay $100 fee each year or whatever.
But they don't do that.
Well,
You could set up an ordinance that says you can do that, but that takes work and effort.
That's a lot of management.
Due diligence and.
I've heard Ms. Bills, she's been in front of the planning commission twice. I've heard Mr. Ottman, his concerns, I agree with his concerns. I understand the clash here, I get it. What's weighing heavily on me is the fact that you've attended 2 planning commission meetings, you've been respectful and informative. You took the time to get 200 signatures, that is a petition by the letter of the ordinance. So I think I owe you at least making a motion. And where it goes, everyone here has a vote. So I'm gonna make a motion knowing that the planning commission is gonna vote with their heads and their hearts. I motion that the planning commission, with assistance from the planning consultant as necessary, develop language to address the issues that we've talked about this evening. That's my motion.
And so then what would be the next?
It would start the ball rolling with the understanding that if this fails, I mean, I don't want you leaving here thinking, like walking on cloud 9, thinking,
No.
yippee, this is a done deal. It is nowhere near a done deal, and I've just made the motion, hasn't been seconded yet. But again, given the fact that you've attended 2 planning commission meetings, you've gone through the effort of getting 200 signatures, there's value in that to me, and I think you meet the letter and the spirit of the text amendment. So I just feel in good conscience, I have to make the motion.
Yeah, just one more thing. I will have to get a proposal from Mr. Carlisle and make sure we have budget funds to even do this.
Yep.
So, because we are in a master plan year, most of my funds are allocated, so keep that in mind.
This is only a motion, I haven't even got a second yet, and again, I want you to vote with your hearts and your brains. I'm putting it on the table because it's almost 8 o'clock, you've been really patient this evening, and let's see where this goes.
So if we all approve, it goes to the trustee board, is?
No,
No.
it would start the ball rolling
Do more development or more.
to look at language.
Investigation.
Because I think we need to move this, we either need to bury it, or we need to move it along. I don't want Ms. Bills to have to come to another planning commission meeting, I don't think that's right. There needs to be finality, or we either finish things tonight, or we start the ball rolling.
So I'll support it, and only for the same reason I did on the last one. I don't agree with the last language, the last text amendment, but I supported the public hearing because I think that is important to have exactly what you're talking about. I think I feel the same way about this. I don't necessarily support, changing it, but I agree, especially with the petition. I think it makes sense to not just, quash it now and at least have, the public be able to speak on it. So
Yep.
I'll support it.
Okay. Discussion? We have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Galley,
Yes.
Mr. Lockren,
Yes.
Mr. Mazza,
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie,
Yes.
Chairman Sabadat,
What the heck, I made the motion, sorry, Brian, yes.
Ms. Tully, no.
So again, realistic expectations. We have elected officials, eventually we're gonna see it, if we can come up with an amendment that we agree with, so there's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts here. There's no
Right.
necessarily light at the end of the tunnel here.
So next meeting, is it just a discussion then as well, or?
It may be the next meeting, and maybe, I can't sit here and give you a timeline.
To be determined.
To be determined, agendas are available on the
Right.
township website that you can look at beforehand. You can attend in person, you can attend remotely. I'm hoping Brian doesn't kick me on my way out.
I like I say, he's gonna have to do some planning and some investigation to.
We're gonna have to, it's gotta work,
Next
it's
step.
gotta be something that can work, that we can support, or maybe I don't know, there's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts, but, again, I expressed my reasons for making the motion. I thought that was the right thing to do, and
And it's a public hearing, so there'll be the opportunity for you and then whoever else that signed that petition. And if they have some information that would be valuable for us to consider it, you know, that's the point of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other items for item J discussion? We're still friends, right, Brian? Next item is item K, adjournment. I motion we adjourn.
Support.
We have a motion and support. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Adjourned at exactly 8 PM.